Thank you very much. Thank you for that fantastic introduction. I'm actually starting to believe it these days. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see you here. Nice to have someone introduce me here this evening so I can join in this practice management webinar series. And thanks to St. Francis Group, I think, who are also sponsoring this. Right, tonight we want to talk about data, benchmarking, and really I want to move on to decisions. How do we use that data strategically and effectively to drive our businesses, to get some of the results we want? And it's not all financial, it's obviously the other outputs of our businesses. We want good patient care, good veterinary medicine, we want good client experience, we want obviously to be profitable so we can reinvest back in the business, and of course we want our team to be harmonious and working well, and that is probably the linchpin of all that there. So data is a hard subject in that it is hard data. There's some soft data and there's inferences we can get from that. So let me just walk you through my view of it. Some of you may remember in the dark days when I worked as the Fort Dodge Index guy, and of course that moved on to Pfizer Index, and we had a really powerful set of data coming through the veterinary industry. It was actually something that no other country had, that we had this handle on really how the veterinary profession was performing in many ways. Unfortunately that's gone, but there has been a resurgence in data and an interest in data, and there's some new data and benchmarking processes out there which is fantastic for the industry, and it's stuff we should embrace and encourage and take on board in our own practices, but it takes time, effort and energy to do so. So I just really want to give an overview of how to use data and how, some of the ways we're doing, and certainly I want to give you examples of how we are using data, because it's a passion of mine that drives our own business, it drives our clients' businesses, and I think it's something that we can use powerfully and effectively in the veterinary profession to make serious changes. So data itself is a definition. It's identifying, understanding, adapting not just the average practices and processes, but I would say the outstanding practice process. Why would you want to benchmark or look at the average in a business? You want to look at the best in a business, and you take those benchmarks, but what do you want to do is look behind that and say, what's the process that made this happen, and adapt those processes to help your own business improve its performance across those four areas. So it's two things: data, what are we measuring, how are we measuring it, and then it's the benchmark, how are we doing against others. So there's two in a way. Unfortunately, my experience is working with data, particularly veterinary data, it is a very imprecise science. It's confused by a multitude of parameters and other things, geography, the different price structures, different price strategies. There's something like 26 different practice management systems out there, bespoke ones, the mainstream ones. There hasn't been a lot of consolidation of those. Some people are trying to do that, but this means there's enormous number of ways of interpreting, storing, outputting that data, which creates confusion. Then build into that sort of your business model clinically, whether it's first opinion, referral, etc. You've got preventative healthcare versus clinical business. You've got retail with your drugs, a separate business again. Your practice type, your practice species, small animal, large animal, equine, etc. One branch practice, 15 vet practice, multiple branch, again, a lot of confusions, and then just the internal parameters. So we need to, anyone dealing with data needs to spend a lot of time validating and verifying that data to some level of consistency, and that is probably the hardest part of it. Two parts of it: getting the data initially out of practice management systems and from Sage accounts, etc., and then actually getting into a format that is consistent with our practice, particularly if you're going to compare amongst others. That, to me, is the eighth wonder of the world, that we can actually do that at all. And there's some compromises in that, and we've got to accept those, and we've got to live with those. So what I'm saying here, understanding the assumptions we start with is really important here, and taking everything with probably a fairly large pinch of salt with this. But having said that, I would say, well, I actually know from experience, and experience from the Fort Dodge days, and also from my own current client base, practices that set goals, have a clear view of where they're going, vision, mission, strategy and implementation. They benchmark those goals, they measure and monitor their performance, they do better financially. I would say, exponentially financially, and also in all those other areas: customer experience, patient care, team harmony, etc. So to me, it's a very powerful thing, and it's something that needs to be done. Though in the busy life of a practice owner who's being a clinician, a practice manager maybe, etc., it's difficult to do. So we need a simplicity presented to practice owners that they can make sense of, because the danger is there's a massive amount of data available, not all of it verified, and you can get confused. So we need to sort of tap it down. It raises three questions that we need to answer in this case. And what I'm trying to present is the simplicity that you need to see as a practice owner. We need to deal with the complexity behind that to get to that simplicity. So really what most people want to know is that external view. Well, what's happening out there in the profession? Now that's important. And so it's a big thing the Fort Dodge Indices was very good at, of actually giving this trends and what's happening. And that's still something we're working on and seeing, because there's so much change going on. What's happening nationally, but certainly what's happening regionally, and the regional differences are quite spectacular. Of course, we've got the economy, we've got competition, we've got corporates, we've got commoditization, we've got external influences coming in. All this is part of it. We need to know what those trends are. Key question: so how am I doing? Where am I doing? What's happening in my practice? And if I ask practice owners, even the simplest of metrics, what's your turnover profitability, what's your cost base for consumables, what's your cost base for staff, it's amazing how little they know. And then if you ask the team members, they know nothing. They know very little about that. And of course, if you haven't got some handle on what you're doing and contributing to day to day, week to week, working in a business, how much effort, how much autonomy, how much motivation can you put into something where you're wandering through the dark really without any information there? So again, we need simplicity we can feed down to our team as well. That's really important in terms of that autonomy and motivation and purpose for those men. Of course, key thing, and this is the point I want to get to really, data is data until we make some sense of it, interpret it and see it in some format we understand, step one, and two, put it in context of where we are, what we're trying to achieve, what our outcomes are, and three, what's the trends going on behind? Are we going with the trend or against the trend? Are we fighting uphill or downhill? So what can you do about it is probably the key question. And that step there between getting the data, even the benchmarking, and actually making strategic decisions is really the key differentiator that is important. So let me sort of explain that a little bit further. Just a few more definitions with this. There's really two types of parameters that we produce. Some of it's just raw data, as in we can get a figure, see what it is, and it's an absolute figure, and it tells us something. Such as measures. So what are you going to measure? It gives numbers and it gives quantity. So it's a quantifiable figure. Turnover, average transaction value, transaction volume, client numbers. These are fairly standard things. Probably most PMS systems will generate for you in some shape or form. And of course we can measure in one of those. What I'm more interested in, that's kind of the application stuff. You have a computer system, you put stuff in it, and of course it does depend on what you put into it. It will churn stuff out at you, and that's the application stuff that comes out of the system. What I am really more interested in is the implication of that data. So moving to implication, you need wisdom and knowledge rather than just basic information. So trends and processes and contributors to a certain outcome. So client numbers is X, but that's really a factor of how many you're gaining on a monthly basis, how many you're losing on a monthly basis, how many animals you put to sleep on a monthly basis. There's lots of underlying parameters that affect any single thing, and it's knowing, sort of understanding those nuances that is really important. Then when it comes to clients, it's what's your marketing doing? What are you doing to create those clients? What are you doing to retain the clients that are leaving? So again, measures and methods, applications versus implications, really important differential to make. And again, this isn't your job to do this. You will be pulling data for your own systems, you will be making some of these assessments, but what we would hope from a national database of some sort, we can give you these trends and give you that context to make decisions within. Equally, what we've seen in the past and what we're seeing happening again now is there's kind of three levels of benchmarking kicking in to the system. There's external benchmarking, which is basically saying what's happening out there, what is everyone else doing?